Welcome to Vancouver Opera Offstage. I'm your host, Les Dala, chorus director and associate conductor at Vancouver Opera. Join me for this weekly podcast as we connect with opera experts, artists, staff, and others to explore the world of opera on and off the stage. We are honored to share our stories on the unceded homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. For those who may not know me, I've had the pleasure of leading the Vancouver Opera Chorus and Orchestra, as well as directing the Vancouver Bach Choir and the Vancouver Academy of Music Symphony Orchestra for many years. As program director of Vancouver Opera's Yolanda M. Ferris Young Artist Program, it has been my privilege to work alongside and train many up-and-coming opera stars. Through this podcast series, I hope to introduce to you the wealth of talent in the world of the arts, explore the craft and experiences of those who take opera from the page to the stage, and share the personal stories of artists, singers, musicians, and educators. Through these discussions, we will gain inspiration and maybe learn something new from the incredible people working in all areas of the arts community. In these first podcasts, my guests and I will not be in a soundstage or a recording studio. We'll be talking remotely in our homes, as many of you are right now. As we all pull together through these challenging times and social isolation, I hope this podcast is yet another stitch that keeps the fabric of our community strong and vibrant. Today, I'll be chatting with Tom Wright, Vancouver Opera's newly appointed General Director. Tom previously held the position of Director of Artistic Planning at VO for 13 seasons. We're talking about leadership during a pandemic and his vision for the future of Vancouver Opera.
Good afternoon, Tom Wright. Welcome to the podcast. It is my pleasure to welcome you as the newly appointed General Director of Vancouver Opera. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Les. It's nice to have that little word removed from my title.
Indeed,
not much else is exactly.
Yes.
Not much else is going to change.
Well, I'm thrilled for you. I know everybody is, and we look forward to this period of your leadership in very uncertain times.
Yes, and I've been completely overwhelmed and really heartened with the amount of response from around the world. Artists, directors, designers, friends, colleagues, family that have reached out, giving me congratulations with this new title. And you're right, it is at a very precarious, interesting time in our lives as COVID-19 is wreaking havoc. There is no normal anymore, and everybody's hoping there's going to be a normal someday, and what that new normal will be.
Indeed. I think that's something we will revisit in this conversation. But for now, if you don't mind, I'd like to go back to the start. You have a very strong connection to Vancouver, and I think few people know that. Take us back a little bit as to, where you were born, where you grew up.
Yes, absolutely. I was born in Calgary, but I lived there for 1 year, and my dad was headhunted by the city of Vancouver to open up the H.R. Macmillan Planetarium in 1967. So that's when I moved to North Vancouver with my mom and dad, and have fond memories of growing up here in beautiful Vancouver. Went to great high school, Hanser Secondary School, where I learned a lot about theater and music. During my early years in high school, I played violin, cello, and piano, and my mom and dad took me to the symphony and the North Shore Light Opera, lots of GNS. But what happened to me was I got the theater bug in high school, and I was doing the assemblies. I would go to school early. I would have the alarm codes or the keys. I would go in, I'd set up for assemblies, I'd set up for theatrical productions, I'd set up for large rallies, sports rallies. I was the guy that knew how to do all that, and that was happening in grade 10. So by the time I'd finished grade 11, my high school gave me a scholarship to attend the BAT School of Fine Arts, which is where I started learning about stagecraft. My intention back in those days was to be a lighting designer, but I discovered early on that I'm colorblind, slightly in reds and greens, which took me right out of the running for being any sort of designer. But I learned very quickly all aspects of theater production. And I also met that first summer in Banff, Colin Graham, who you know, of course, as Benjamin Britten's dramaturg and directed many of Benjamin Britten's premier operas. So he was running the opera program in Banff, and he instilled upon me the importance of theater in classical music, in opera. And really, that's where I think my opera bug started, was back in the early 80s in Banff. And it's interesting because one of the first shows I worked on was A Midsummer Night's Dream. And it was directed by Colin. And there was a young tenor by the name of Richard Margison, and a young
Never heard of him.
Exactly. A young soprano by the name of Tracy Dahl, also in that production. And Stuart Bedford was the conductor. Those early days in Banff really started me down the road of opera. I then worked at Calgary Opera for 12 years, starting as an assistant stage manager and working up to director of artistic planning, which is the position that I took when I left Calgary Opera and went to Arizona Opera, where I worked for 9 seasons as director of artistic planning, overseeing all the artistic production, education, and IT for Arizona Opera. I was the first person to come in and set up a wide area network between Tucson and Phoenix offices. But it was, I guess it was 2006. I'd hinted to Canadian colleagues that it was time to get back home. My 2 young kids, I didn't want them going to school, high school in the States. So Jim Wright happened to hear this, and he was going to be in Santa Fe with some donors. I went up and had dinner with Jim, and by the end of the dinner conversation, he had offered me a position to start in a year at Vancouver Opera, because that's the planning horizon he was looking at. It was great to be able to give Arizona Opera a full year's notice and work through the transition, and also start coming up to Vancouver to see the great team that Vancouver Opera had assembled. I think the first show I saw there was Macbeth.
I do recall meeting you during that. Yeah. Wow, that must have been a very memorable dinner, as far as dinners stick out, eh? Having dinner in Santa Fe, and at the end of it, you're offered a job. That sounds like a glorious story. I must say, one of the things that has always impressed me about you is that you understand every aspect of what goes into producing an opera and theater. And whether it's, like you said, you've done this side of stage management, of the technical side of things, doing the IT, even in addition to casting shows, putting all of this together, dealing with unions and contracts and things. I mean, you really understand the art form from every side. I know very few people who can say that.
Yeah, I do understand the majority of what it takes to produce opera and to run an opera company. That's for sure. I'm not an expert by any means in all those areas, but I do have a strong understanding of each aspect. And it's all about balance, of course. I'm not an expert in the voice. That's why Vancouver Opera has great people like you, great people like our music staff, and Jonathan Darlington, our music director emeritus. My thought about casting comes down to finding the best voices and the best performers to portray the characters for which they're being hired. And, it's fun. Again, I'm not an expert at it, but I do think that my experience does come into play when I am thinking about who is the best person to perform this. For me, having such great talent in Vancouver makes my job super easy. As you know, putting together choruses, orchestras, ensembles of any sort, when you have a talent pool as rich as Vancouver Opera has in the chorus, in the orchestra, in all the artisans that produce our shows in Queen Elizabeth or wherever we're producing, it only makes my job easier. What is going to be challenging for the future, of course, is casting, because bringing artists from outside of Canada is going to become more complex nowadays. I imagine there's going to be a whole new health factor that comes into play with regards to bringing in artists into Canada. In fact, we just discussed this morning that there may be a 2-week quarantine period for which employers are asked to pay for and house and feed temporary foreign workers, for which conductors, directors, designers, singers would all fit into that category as a temporary foreign worker. I can't imagine that happening.
My goodness. Well, I have to say, in the age of COVID-19, I remember having a conversation with you at the very beginning of March, and I was just on my way to Germany for a week to go. It was sort of a dream trip. I'd always want to see the Berlin Phil live, and I knew I had lined up opening night tickets to Carmen, conducted by Daniel Barenboim at the Staatsoper. And we had a drink, and you were talking about, well, things may change. They may start to shut down. You even made reference to the fact that another brick in the wall might not happen. And I kind of stared at you dumbfounded. This must have been March 1st, I think. Mm-hmm. And it's true, I was back on the 12th, which even Angela Merkel refers to. That's the day when everything changed. And I remember coming back from Germany. I managed to see the Berlin Phil play the last program before they shut down the hall. I saw opening night of Carmen. There was no second performance of Carmen. I believe on the night that would have been the third performance, the day I left, I believe that they actually did perform to an empty house and live streamed it. But even at that point, gatherings, with the orchestra and huge chorus, that was the last time that could happen. And I remember the day after I got back speaking with you, and you told me the regrettable news that unfortunately the production was canceled. I remember that was March 13th. And I also learned from you that you were the first one in the entire Canadian art scene to reach out to the Canada Council, and in this case to the Provincial Arts Council, asking them what their plan was for COVID. So you were very much ahead of the curve. We talk about a lot of curves these days, but in the planning, you had worst case scenario seen this coming. And I, again, admire the fact that you were really thinking always with an eye to the future and what can happen.
I tried to be. And I have to say, I was completely shocked when I reached out to Canada Council and BC Arts Council. And I was, in fact, the first person, according to our program officer, who had contacted them to say, is anything going to happen with regards to emergency funding, bridge funding, loans, anything to arts organizations to help weather the storm? Now, of course, the next day they contacted me and said, yeah, we'll be in touch with you next week. You're right. Everything has changed. That is the day the world literally came to a halt.
I'd like to touch on some of the casting that you've done, Tom, in the last few years. You've introduced Vancouver to some singers that even I had never heard of, who were just the perfect fits. I'm thinking most recently of Edward Nelson in the role of Figaro in Barbiere. As soon as we closed that show, a week later, he was competing for the Glyndebourne Cup, and he, in fact, was the grand prize winner. Mm-hmm. How did you find him?
Edward Nelson was somebody who I heard in audition in New York the year before, so about a year out from the production, and his manager puts together every Christmas, every fall, an opportunity for casting directors, general directors, to come to New York and listen to their company's new talent that they have found. So I had heard him in that audition, and I'd also followed his time in San Francisco, where he was a young artist.
And if I'm not mistaken, this was his role debut.
It was. I think he had performed scenes and probably covered it in San Francisco.
Yes.
But and maybe he got a performance there. I can't remember if he did step in for an ailing colleague. But I do know that his professional debut was with Vancouver Opera, and that's a big part of what I try and do is hire young talent, emerging talent. We need to give opportunities to young artists to excel and to experiment. But on the flip side of that, I think it's also important, and this is something that I did with our Turandot a few years ago.
Yes. Amber, I don't know if she pronounces it Wagner or Wagner, but she made her role debut, right, as Turandot.
Yes. So she had already been slated to sing the role at the Lyric Opera of Chicago in November of the fall. I'd spoken with her manager saying, well, why doesn't she come to Vancouver in October and give the role, let's see how it fits in her voice, and she can practice on Vancouver, and we can get a great dramatic soprano to come in. And it was a great experience for her, and she still connects with me today, telling me just how important that was to her, because she's been known, and she'd set up her career as being a Wagnerian soprano.
Yes.
In fact, when she first started to study the role, she was like, I don't want to sing this. This is insane. But giving her a chance, and giving any artist a chance that's looking at adding a new role, if they're an established artist or is looking at changing, I think that's a great opportunity that Vancouver has, is to invite those artists to come to Vancouver. Because as you know, Vancouver Opera has a great track record of supporting the talent on stage, all the talent. Obviously, the principal artists are very important, but it's the chorus, it's the family feeling that Vancouver Opera has that makes our shows so special. And that's what the audience feels at the end of the night. That's what they're applauding or standing up for, is everybody supporting one another to put on the best show they possibly can.
Indeed. And I know we talked about a couple of international singers, but you also have a really fantastic commitment to hiring Canadian singers, and there's no shortage of fantastic Canadian singers. The other thing that has happened since you came to Vancouver, for which I'm most grateful, I think, is the creation of the Yolanda M. Ferris Young Artist Program, which is something I think that had been talked about for a number of years, but one year turned to the next, and still we're waiting for this program to happen. Finally, it got launched in 2012. I'd love to hear your take on how that came into being.
That started over dinner with Jim in 2006. So we had just started the Young Artist Program in Arizona, and Jim asked me what I thought I could bring to the table. And I said, well, I think Vancouver Opera has had a Young Artist Program before, but you don't currently. And it just seems like a great opportunity in Vancouver to launch a program. And so we certainly talked about it, and it took a few years to strategize and fundraise and create and develop the program. But there's certainly no looking back on this program. It's been such a great vehicle for young audience, young singers, young directors, young pianists, coaches to develop their craft and learn more about the opera sector than they're ever going to learn at university. Because, universities are great. They give all the basics of what it takes to become an opera singer, but the real life experience you cannot get anywhere but at an opera company. And that's what we obviously offer. We also, of course, like yourself, who is the program director of the Young Artist Program, Kinza, Tina, Maestro Darlington, all of the guest artists that we bring in is also the great asset to the training process of the young artists. And I think I'm specifically, I'm of course proud of all the singers that are continuing to work in the field today, but I'm super proud of some of the directors that have come through our program that are now getting their own productions. Like Brenna Corner, for instance, yes, is creating productions for opera companies in the United States of America, big companies, and she started with us. That was where she went from university level training to becoming a professional. And that's the whole point of a young artist program, is to provide that bridge training. So I'm super proud of Brenna and of all the stage directors. Kimberly Ann Bartsack, of course, was our first pianist, was she not?
She came in year 2, actually.
Oh, year 2, that's right. Yes, year 2. So Kim is, she's now the head of music, I guess. I'm not officially sure what her title is, but at Calgary Opera, she's certainly the person who's running the show there musically, along with the artistic director, Bram Montovi.
Yes, I think resident conductor is her official title, I believe. Yes, yeah.
And that's great, because she didn't even know when she came into our program that conducting was something that she was going to eventually evolve into, was becoming a conductor. And I think she probably got that bug from you.
We had a few conversations about that sort of thing. It's true. Your description of it being a bug, it is sort of that. It's one of those things that may suddenly one day appear out of nowhere, and then you realize that actually there's been a gestation period for that, and then you start to think, well, how do I go from point A to point B? And I'm very proud of Kim and everything that she's accomplished. She's actually spent 3 years with us, which is the longest of any. We've had some singers stay for 2, but Kim stayed for 3. And I think in those 3 years, the experience, the knowledge, everything that she gained was huge and has really set her on her way. And it's always nice to have a success story.
Yeah. And even those singers that went through our program and maybe are not singing anymore, that's okay too. That's what the program is for. We're going to push you hard. You're going to learn a lot. And you may figure out at the end of it that maybe this isn't what you want to be doing with your life. And I think that's equally as an important part of the program.
I guess if I were to ask you 2 months ago what some of the biggest challenges ahead were, as compared to now, everything has changed, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the challenges in Vancouver continue to be the challenges in Vancouver, and that is we're constantly competing for our natural beauty surroundings, right? The recreation of outdoor life in Vancouver is one of the biggest competitors for anybody who produces anything indoors. Now, yes. you put that layer of, and you're not allowed to be within 6 feet of any other human being. And, well, it's completely eliminated.
Well said.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you care to talk about some of your personal highlights in the last 13 years in Vancouver?
Sure.
Some of the shows that stand out.
Yeah. Well, for me, I mean, one of my favorite operas is Eugene Onegin. So having a chance to produce that new Onegin that we did in 2009 was a thrill. And then again, getting a chance to do it just 2 years ago was also a thrill. It's a great opera. But I guess for me, really, Lillian Alling was a lot of fun because we got to create something from nothing. The engagement of the composer and librettist and dramaturg, the whole process of creating something was so exciting, so fulfilling to be involved in. And then, obviously to have that production produced here in Vancouver and then have it go to Banff, where our co-producers, under your baton, got to experience it in Alberta. And that's sort of a regret I have, is that we actually had to get rid of the physical production, the set and the props, because nobody was renting it and there was no chance of a second performance. But I would love to bring that back. And I think it's an important piece. And I've heard many subscribers have said to me, is Lillian Alling ever coming back? So I questioned Jim when he first said, let's do Nixon in China. And I'd never heard of it. And I put on a recording and I was like, what? What are you doing? We can't do this. And then I listened to it again. And then I listened to it again. And I went, okay, there's a lot more to this. You have to give it a chance. And for me, bringing together Michael Cavanaugh and Erhard Rom was something that I'd been talking about in Arizona. So to have them work on something was thrilling. Not only for what our show was, our Nixon in China was absolutely a stunning and very well thought out production. And I know so because David Gockley, who was the original general director that commissioned that piece when he was with Houston, saw our production and actually changed his future plans to rent our production and not the other production that existed. So that was thrilling to know that we had created something that was going to go places. And it did go places. It went to San Francisco, went to Kansas City, it went to Ireland. And then from Ireland, we sold it to the Royal Swedish Opera, where it is running in repertory in Sweden. So that's the thrill. And
that is a great story.
And because of that, and maybe I should be asking Michael and Erhard for an agent's fee, but they've gone back twice now to San Francisco Opera to create new productions. They created the Susanna
Yes.
a few years ago. And then most recently, of course, is the De Ponte trilogy, the three Mozart De Ponte operas, which, is great experience for anybody to be working in a house like San Francisco Opera. So I'm super proud of that. Moving a little closer to where we are now, West Side Story was a thrill. And for me personally, a lot of a thrill because I did West Side Story in grade 12. And
Thank goodness.
that was the opera that was the production that Hands Were Secondary decided to produce the year that I got back from my second summer in Banff. So I received 2 summer stagecraft training sessions, and we actually did West Side Story in Banff that summer too. So I had that connection, and we did it at the Centennial Theatre in North Vancouver. So this wasn't a high school production. This was a high school production. This was the real deal. We brought in lots of theatrical assistants and consulting on it. Our music staff was great. Our directors were great. And I got to stage manage, lighting design, do everything. And it was a thrill. So to be able to produce it professionally with Vancouver Opera, like we did, was a great thrill. Switching gears, the Don Carlo for me too was really a great overall massive production for us to pull off in Vancouver. The musical forces behind that, everybody on the stage singing the principal roles, the chorus, the orchestra, we really reached a high level of excellence in that show. And I think that was heard by everybody in the audience. And many folks who travel the world who see opera were comparing that to the ones they'd seen in Europe and saying it was far better than anyone I've ever seen before. So that's always a good feeling when those that love the art form travel the world and come back and say ours was better. I love that. I also have to say that, of course, our experiments with producing opera in the Playhouse was great. It was a great experience for everybody involved. The shows were remarkable. Everything we did in the Playhouse, even Dark Sisters. I know there's lots of people that poo-pooed Dark Sisters, but it was a great show. And there's still people that talk to me about that was their first opera and it blew them away. And I love to hear that, that the theatrical component to that piece really stood out. But producing opera in that intimate space provided many people with an experience that you just can't get in a large house and you can't get in North American opera houses. And that's the intimacy of the opera singer and the storytelling. So close and even more visceral than what you get in a large venue. So all the shows we did in the Playhouse were a treat for all of us to work on.
I must say I was at the helm of 4 of those, the 2 premieres, The Overcoat and Stick Boy, as well as the Nozze di Figaro and Cenerentola. And it, as you say, it was such a pleasure to be in that small house. Although the pit was of limited size, and of course the stage is smaller, but what you get in return is something so incredibly immediate. And the person sitting furthest away is still so close, part of the action, really. And you're right, it is the kind of intimacy that you find in most European houses, except for the biggest ones. And it makes sense why opera is so powerful and visceral.
Well, and I would love to try and figure out the economics around producing in a smaller venue. That is one of I mentioned earlier, one of the challenges with producing opera in Vancouver is our environment and competing with the recreation and the beauty of Vancouver. The other one is quite honestly our lack of facilities. We have one theater where we can produce grand opera and it's far too big. And there is no other theater suitable in size to produce even chamber opera. The chamber operas that we did in the Playhouse, we had to reduce the orchestration to produce those shows for the most part, except for Stick Boy, which we commissioned for the venue.
And The Overcoat.
And the Overcoat, which we commissioned for a smaller venue. But the Mozarts, they should be in and around 30 to 40 players, and we could only, of course, fit 20. as you know.
I do.
So, again, with what's going on in the world right now, we're talking decades before we see a new venue in this city, which is unfortunate. But if we had a 15 to 1800 seat venue with a capacity for the orchestra pit to be 55 to 80, we would be in heaven.
Once we get past this COVID-19 phase, what is your vision of Vancouver Opera moving forward in the next decade, say, or even beyond?
Well, one of the things we learned about our festival was all of the external programming that we produced was successful. It was successful in that it attracted a new audience. It year after year, people asked to come back to the same sort of programming that we were looking at doing. And that is the stuff that we will continue to do throughout the year now. So in the 3 months or 4 months when we get back to producing 4 operas a season, we will be doing programming of some sort in every month of the year. So it'll be our education programming, our community engagement programming, our young artist programs. We will be creating content for festivals, for instance, the Car Free Days, the Italian Days, the Pride Festival. And then there's the collaborations with other organizations. Matthew White and I have been talking for 2.5 years now about collaborating on an early music opera, which Vancouver Opera has produced one early piece of early music, Alcina, in like 1970 or something like that. Something crazy. We've never produced early opera, Baroque opera. And we don't need to try and produce it ourselves when you've got a partner like Early Music Vancouver. So exploring that relationship, continuing to explore the relationships that we started together with the Bach Choir, maybe producing something or collaborating with Push Festival on some presentations of new operas. That Macbeth that we co-presented with Push Festival 3-4 years ago was a great success. I would love to present something similar to that. So I think what you'll see Vancouver Opera become over the next little while is back to grassroots opera company, because it is the people that make us a special company that we need to tout, that we need to support. And that's only going to happen with the family staying together. So the chorus, the orchestra, the crews. It's fascinating. We have several crew members whose parents were in the original crew or ran the original crews when Vancouver Opera started in 1960. And a lot of people don't realize that. That's why our crew is so dedicated to our productions, because they were born with it, that this is, you work at the Queen Elizabeth Theatre, and when the opera comes to town, you go above and beyond. And that I see all the time from our crews supporting what we do on stage. So
that is truly unique.
Yeah.
And incredibly special.
There are some cities where the union rules are so tight that a prop can't be carried across the stage by a prop person. It has to be met at center stage, and the other person on the other side has to come and get it. I mean, that just would not happen in Vancouver. So we are thrilled, and we are blessed to have all of these great, talented folks that work for Vancouver Opera. So we'll continue producing great world-class opera to the means that we have, but we will be exploring a lot more intimate works, collaborations, and our young artist program. We will continue to make sure that it has the opportunity, and the artists involved in the young artist program have the opportunity to excel and to learn and to perform.
So the 2021 season is, in fact, Vancouver Opera's 60th anniversary, a huge milestone. And I know there will be lots of surprises along the way, but you've put together a main stage season of 3 great classic masterpieces. Would you care to share them with us, Tom?
Absolutely. Well, I'm thrilled that Vancouver Opera is going to open its 60th anniversary season by paying homage to the first opera for which the company produced, Carmen, in 1960. So 60 years later, in November of 2020, we will produce Carmen again. And I'm thrilled that I have an amazing creative team in Rachel Peak directing this production, and Maestro Les Dala on the podium. This will be your third time working with Rachel, I believe.
In fact, fourth.
Fourth, that's right. And this will be the first time that you've both worked together in the Queen Elizabeth, though.
That's right.
So this is thrilling for us, and there'll be casting information coming out in May. The second production is the production of Così fan tutte, which we had canceled from this year, but I was able to move the entire creative team and artists to the new dates in February of 21. So thrilled that we're bringing this opera to the stage. Brenna Corner will be directing that production, so it's great to have Brenna back. And returning to the Vancouver Opera podium is, of course, Vancouver Opera's former music director and the former artistic director, general director of the Wexford Festival, Maestro David Agler. So that will be an exciting production. I think, though, for me personally, the biggest excitement about the 60th anniversary season has to be our last production in the Queen Elizabeth, and that is Falstaff. This is probably my favorite opera, having worked on it early in my career in Banff, and then once again in Calgary, and then once in Arizona. It is an amazing opera. It is, I don't know, probably, if not Verdi's best, his second best. if you want to have a competition about that, it certainly is right up there. And it was his second comedy, which I think is also amazing, that he ended his career with such a brilliant composition and playing fun. And I think that's what makes the show so exciting, making fun of everything. So I'm looking forward to that production. I'm looking forward to this season. And I just wanted to say that although I am the official general director, Vancouver Opera has a great management team, the senior managers who are all partners to me. Lisa Westermark in development, Sarah Hintner in marketing, Colleen Mabin in education and community engagement, and Adrienne Wirtz in the artistic department. Adrienne, of course, she's been with the company for, I believe, 19 years now, and she's been my associate for my tenure here. So I just recently asked her to join the senior leadership team in planning and discussions as we move forward. So it's a thrill to have her joining us for that as well. And Doug Kearns, who is our interim finance director, while Katrina Cheng is being a mom again. It was great to speak to Katrina just recently as she has welcomed her baby daughter into the world. So we have a great team. We have an amazing company, and we also have a great facility. The Michael and Ina O'Brien Opera Center for Vancouver Opera is a cultural hub, and it's been a great experience for Vancouver Opera to have resided in this space at McLean Drive and 3rd Avenue for the last 8 years. And we look forward to really transforming the facility into a real cultural hub. The Vancouver International Children's Festival is now resident there. Pie Theatre is resident there. The Vancouver Men's Chorus is resident there. Bard on the Beach builds all their props every season in our prop shop. We've rented out the space to many, many users, and we will continue to do so. And we will continue to welcome more arts groups under our roof and really turning the venue into a cultural hub for the east side of Vancouver.
Fantastic. It's really about community, isn't it?
It is. It's all about community, and even more so in the days to come. It's going to be about everybody supporting one another to make sure we all survive this new normal. Well, we're not there yet. We're not at any sort of normal yet.
How very true. Well, Tom, it's been my great pleasure to speak with you as always. And once again, congratulations on your new designation as Vancouver Opera's General Director. I think we're all very excited to see the great plans you've got for the company in the years ahead.
Join us again next week when we'll be catching up with Jonathan Darlington, Music Director Emeritus of Vancouver Opera, from his home in Paris, France. We'd love to hear from you if you have any feedback or suggestions for upcoming guests. You can reach us via email at online@vancouveropera.ca, and don't forget to check out this episode's special features on our website at vancouveropera.ca/offstage. This has been Vancouver Opera Offstage. I'm your host, Les Dala. As always, you can keep up to date with Vancouver Opera at vancouveropera.ca, where you can sign up for our e-newsletter or follow us on social media. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.